Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin today with a simple truth that changed my life many years ago. Success is not built on luck. Success is not built on talent. Success, real success, the kind that lasts, the kind that grows year after year, is built on something far quieter, far simpler than most people ever imagine. It is built on your ability to trust yourself, to believe your own word, to say, I will, and then make good on the promise, not to your boss, not to your neighbor, not to the world, but to yourself. See, the world talks a lot about self-confidence, but I've learned that self-confidence comes from one thing, self-trust. And self-trust is not something you are born with. It's not something you stumble into. It's something you earn. And you earn it by doing exactly what you said you would do. Most people don't lack goals. They don't lack dreams. They don't lack ambition. What they lack is the internal belief that they will actually do what they intend to do. And that, my friends, is the quiet tragedy of modern living people with enormous potential who cannot bring themselves to believe their own commitments. But here's the good news. Self-trust can be rebuilt. Just like a muscle can be strengthened, just like a skill can be learned, self-trust can be earned back one small decision at a time. And those decisions, small as they may be, create a bridge between the person you are today and the person you wish to become. Over the next several minutes, I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine waking up 6 months from now, 180 days, and discovering that you have become someone you can depend on, someone who keeps their word, someone who follows through, someone whose plans are stronger than their feelings, someone who can say, I will, and then deliver every single day. And what if I told you that you don't arrive at that place by giant leaps, not by dramatic changes, not by grand resolutions? You get there by something far smaller, far more humble, tiny promises. One small commitment, done daily, without negotiation. That's the bridge. That's the turning point. That's the beginning of rebuilding a life from the inside out. So today, let us explore this journey. Let us understand how one small promise kept today, kept tomorrow, can transform your identity, your confidence, your destiny. Because if there is one thing I know after all these years, it is this: your future is built on the promises you keep, and the very first promises worth keeping are the ones you make to yourself. Now that we've opened the door, let's walk a little farther inside. Let's talk about a problem that almost no one admits out loud, yet almost everyone suffers from privately. It's the reason people feel stuck. It's the reason their confidence fades. It's the reason success seems to slip through their fingers like water. The problem is simple. You don't trust yourself. And before you think that's harsh, let me explain. Human beings are fascinating creatures. We will keep our word to everyone except the person who matters most, ourselves. If your boss says, I need that report by Friday, you'll work late Thursday night to get it done. If a friend says, let's meet at 10, you'll show up at 10. But when you tell yourself, tomorrow morning, I'm going to get up early and start that exercise plan, well, suddenly the promise becomes negotiable. Suddenly it becomes optional. Suddenly it depends on how you feel. And here's the danger. Every time you break a promise to yourself, you think it's no big deal, but your subconscious is taking notes. Your character is taking notes. Your identity is taking notes. Deep down, you start to realize, when I make myself a promise, I usually don't mean it. And that realization is devastating, because everything meaningful in life requires a strong relationship with yourself. You see, every broken promise creates a tiny crack in your self-belief. One missed day, one skipped habit, one I'll start again Monday. These things don't seem like much, but they stack, they accumulate. And soon they form a pattern. And patterns create identity. And identity is destiny. Let me put it to you this way. If you walked into a bank and the manager said, you can't trust us with your money, you would run out the door. Yet many people go through life putting their dreams, their goals, their future into a mind that has learned not to trust itself, and they wonder why nothing grows. They wonder why they quit so easily. They wonder why fear whispers louder than ambition. But the real cause isn't laziness. It isn't weakness. It isn't lack of inspiration. The real cause is this. You've taught yourself over many years that your own word doesn't carry much weight. And once you lose trust in yourself, everything else becomes difficult. Consistency becomes a struggle. Goals become fantasies. And motivation becomes a temporary burst instead of a sustained force. But the opposite is also true. When you trust yourself, when you know that your word to yourself is as solid as your word to others, you become powerful, you become reliable, you become unstoppable. That's why self-trust is the foundation of all discipline and all success. So before we talk about systems and strategies and daily habits, we must confront this problem head on. The reason you haven't become the person you want to be is not because you lack potential, it's because you've been building your life on a shaky foundation. And today, we begin rebuilding that foundation brick by brick with something so small you might overlook it, tiny promises. Because if you can strengthen the relationship you have with yourself, everything else will strengthen with it. Now that we've uncovered the problem, let's talk about the truth that liberates you from it. And it's a truth I wish someone had told me when I was younger. It would have saved me years of frustration. Here it is. Self-trust isn't something you feel, it's something you earn. Most people wait for a surge of confidence before they act. They wait for motivation. They wait for inspiration. They wait for that magical morning when everything feels right. But let me give you the truth. Motivation is a visitor. Self-trust is a habit. Motivation shows up when it wants to. Self-trust shows up when you build it. And how do you build it? Not by thinking, not by wishing, not by promising yourself that next time will be different. You build it through action, small, consistent action. Think of self-trust like a bank account. Every time you do what you said you'd do, even something tiny, you make a deposit. Every time you break your own commitment, you make a withdrawal. And many people, without realizing it, have been bankrupting their self-trust account for years. Now here's the part most people miss. Your future depends on that account. Your goals depend on that account. Your confidence depends on that account. If the balance is low, every big dream feels impossible. Every new goal feels heavy. Every challenge feels overwhelming. You simply don't believe that you will follow through. That's why you start things and stop. That's why you make plans and abandon them. That's why you dream big at night and doubt yourself in the morning. It's not because the dream is too big, it's because the trust is too small. But here's the miracle. You can rebuild that trust, one kept promise at a time. You don't need to move mountains. Just move a pebble every day. That's enough to start reversing the pattern. That's enough to begin stacking evidence. And that evidence becomes confidence, not the loud, boastful kind, but the quiet, unshakable kind. See, many people chase confidence, but confidence is a byproduct. Self-trust is the source. When you know you'll do what you said you'd do without needing permission from your feelings, you become powerful. Your word becomes valuable. Your decisions become assets, and your identity begins to shift from I hope to I will. And that's when the world begins to open. Opportunities appear. Doors unlock. People notice. Not because you've become lucky, but because you've become reliable. And the marketplace rewards reliability far more than talent. So the truth is simple and liberating. You don't need more inspiration. You don't need more talent. You don't need a new personality. You need a track record built one small action at a time. You need evidence stacked day after day. You need deposits, tiny, consistent deposits in the bank of self-trust. And once you begin building that bank, even in small amounts, the entire direction of your life can change. Now that we understand the truth that self-trust is earned through action, we can move into the solution. And I want you to hear this very clearly. The solution is not complicated. It's not dramatic. It's not even impressive at first glance. In fact, it's so simple that most people overlook it. But don't let the simplicity fool you. This small idea has the power to rebuild your entire character, reshape your identity, and redirect the next decade of your life. The solution is what I call the tiny promise strategy. Let me tell you why tiny matters. When people want to improve their lives, they make big plans. They say, starting Monday, I'm changing everything. And they create a list. Wake up at 5, exercise an hour, read a book a week, cut out sugar, meditate, journal, build a business, learn a language, all starting Monday. And by Tuesday afternoon, the whole plan collapses, not because the person is weak, but because the plan was way too big. You see, big promises require big emotions, but big emotions don't last. Tiny promises don't depend on emotion. They depend on intention. They depend on clarity, and they depend on consistency. A tiny promise is something so small you can do it even on your worst day. Something so specific you can't hide from it. Something so simple your feelings can't use it as a negotiation. Maybe it's 3 minutes of reading, a single glass of water first thing in the morning, 10 push-ups, 1 page of writing, a 2-minute stretch. It almost doesn't matter what the tiny promise is. What matters is that it's tiny, clear, and daily. No wiggle room, no negotiation, no I did part of it. Either you did it or you didn't. And if you did, you made a deposit. And if you didn't, you made a withdrawal. It's that simple. Now, why does this work? It works because it removes the biggest enemy of growth, the feeling of overwhelm. When the promise is tiny, there's nothing to argue about. Your mind can't complain. Your emotions can't derail you. And your excuses lose their power. Let me tell you something important. Consistency is far more powerful than intensity. Intensity impresses people. Consistency transforms them. Tiny promises create consistency at a level that is almost effortless. They build momentum. They create internal proof. And that proof begins to shift your identity from someone who hopes into someone who follows through. Now, here's the key rule of the tiny promise strategy. You must keep the same promise for 30 days straight. Not 29, not almost, 30. Why? Because the first 30 days aren't about the habit itself. They are about identity. They are about self-respect. They are about rebuilding trust where trust has been broken. The first 30 days are the foundation. After that, yes, you can expand. You can make the promise a little bigger. You can add another tiny promise if you choose. But you never start big. You start small. You start simple. You start with something you can guarantee you will complete. And as those tiny promises stack, something quiet and profound happens. Your confidence begins to rise. Your doubt begins to shrink. Your future begins to open. Not because life has changed, but because you have changed. You've begun rebuilding the most important relationship in your life, the relationship you have with yourself. Now let's talk about what actually happens when you follow this tiny promise strategy, not for a day, not for a week, but for 180 days, 6 months. That's enough time to witness a shift so deep that it changes the way you walk into a room, the way you think about your life, and the way you see yourself in the mirror. Because if there's anything I've learned, it's that transformation doesn't happen all at once. It happens in stages, quiet stages, invisible stages, stages you don't even recognize until one day you look back and think, my goodness, I'm not who I used to be. Let's walk through these stages together. Stage 1, the struggle days. 1:30. The first 30 days are not easy. Let me be clear about that. Your old habits will resist. Your feelings will protest. Your mind will say, we don't have time, or let's start tomorrow, or it's only a tiny promise. Missing one day won't matter. But missing one day does matter because you're not just building a habit, you're building trust. These first days aren't about results. They're about rebellion. Rebellion against the old you. The you who negotiated. The you who quit. The you who broke promises to yourself. This stage is where you discover the power of doing what you said regardless of how you feel. Some days you'll feel proud. Some days you'll feel frustrated. Some days you'll feel nothing at all. But if you keep the promise tiny though it may be, you're laying the foundation of a stronger identity. You're proving to yourself that the old pattern can be broken. Remember this, discipline weighs ounces, regret weighs tons. And these first 30 days are where you learn to lift the ounces. Stage 2, the shift days, 3190. Something interesting happens after 1 month. The tiny promise no longer feels like an interruption. It starts to feel like a part of who you are. Consistency begins to take root. Momentum forms. You begin to think differently, move differently, plan differently, the tiny promise becomes a quiet anchor in your day. Now your self-talk changes. Instead of saying, I hope I can do it, you begin saying, of course I'll do it. I always do. Instead of worrying about failure, you start anticipating progress. Instead of negotiating with your feelings, you start consulting your plan. This stage is powerful because you begin to act like a person who trusts themselves. You start stacking tiny wins like bricks. And those bricks begin to build a new internal structure, a stronger one, a sturdier one capable of supporting bigger dreams and heavier responsibilities. You're no longer forcing a habit. The habit is now reinforcing you. Stage 3, the identity, days 91, 180. And then comes the breakthrough. Somewhere after the 90-day mark, maybe at day 100, maybe at day 120, you experience a shift so quiet, so steady, you won't even notice it at first. You stop trying to be disciplined, you simply are disciplined. You stop trying to be consistent, you simply are consistent. You stop trying to be trustworthy, you are trustworthy, because you've proven it day after day. Your tiny promises have now compounded into character. And character is destiny. This is where your life begins to change in ways that surprise even you. You start setting bigger goals without fear. You start taking on challenges you used to avoid. You walk with a different posture, speak with a different tone, think with a different level of clarity, because now you carry internal evidence. I keep my word, I follow through, I trust myself. And let me tell you something. The world responds differently to a person who trusts themselves. Opportunities show up. People take you more seriously. You become someone others can depend on, not because you told them, but because you became someone you could depend on. In 180 days, you don't just build habits, you build a new identity. And once identity changes, everything changes. Now, before we go any further, I want to share something that is absolutely essential, because if you rely on willpower alone, you will struggle. If you rely on motivation alone, you will quit. If you rely on feeling inspired, you might never begin. What truly strengthens the tiny promise strategy, what makes it nearly unbreakable, are the pillars that support it. Think of them as the structure around your new identity. Without these pillars, even the best plan can wobble. With them, even the smallest commitment becomes nearly unstoppable. Let's go through these 4 pillars that hold your consistency in place. Pillar 1, environment, the invisible force. You cannot ignore your environment. You cannot out-discipline your surroundings forever. If you want to change your life, you have to change the places where your life happens. You've heard me say it before. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, but it goes beyond people. It includes your habits, your routines, your tools, your space. If your environment is full of temptations, distractions, clutter, noise, you'll be fighting uphill every day. If you're trying to eat healthy, but your kitchen is full of junk food, well, that doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. If you're trying to read more, but your phone is glowing beside you with 100 notifications, that's not discipline failing. That's environment overpowering discipline. The secret is simple. Design your environment to help you succeed, not to test you. Remove what derails you. Add what supports you. Make the tiny promise the easiest part of your day. Because here's the truth. Your environment is always shaping you, either intentionally or accidentally. Make it intentional. Pillar 2, morning pattern, win the first hour. One of the greatest lessons I've ever learned is this. How you start your day determines how your day goes. Your mornings are a pattern. They are the first domino. And if the first domino falls in the right direction, the rest of them usually follow. But if the first domino falls the wrong way, if you start your day by following your feelings, you've already lost the rhythm. Your tiny promise should live in your morning, not because mornings are magical, but because mornings are neutral. Feelings haven't taken over yet. Distractions haven't multiplied. Decisions haven't piled up. When you perform your tiny promise first thing in the morning, you're telling yourself, I am in charge, not my mood, not my comfort, not my impulses. My plan is in charge, and that one victory sets the tone for the entire day. You walk differently because you've already proven something to yourself before the world even wakes up. Win the first hour, win the day. Win enough days, win the year. Win enough years, and you win your life. Pillar 3, accountability. Someone who asks. There is something incredibly powerful about knowing that someone else will ask, did you keep your promise today? Not to judge you, not to control you, but simply to acknowledge your commitment. Human beings rise to the level of what is expected of them. If no one is watching, your feelings have room to negotiate. But when someone is waiting for your answer, just a simple yes or no, your commitment becomes real. Find someone who is also working on their life, someone who understands growth, someone who respects your journey, and create a simple check-in, a message each morning, a quick call at night, a weekly review. The format doesn't matter. The consistency does. And let me make something clear. Accountability is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of wisdom. The strongest people in the world place structures around their habits. The most successful people surround themselves with expectations. Accountability doesn't make you dependent, it makes you dependable. Pillar 4, reflection. The weekly mirror. The final pillar is reflection. You must become a student of your own behavior. Don't just act, evaluate. Don't just follow, understand. Take one moment each week to look back and ask, did I keep my promise? Where did I hesitate? What triggered me? What supported me? What needs adjusting? Most people live reactive lives. They repeat the same behaviors without ever studying them. But self-reflection turns your life into a lesson. Every win becomes a blueprint. Every setback becomes a teacher. Every week becomes progress. Reflection is where wisdom is born. Reflection is where patterns reveal themselves. Reflection is where identity deepens. And when you combine all 4 pillars, environment, mornings, accountability, and reflection, your tiny promises stop being fragile. They become fortified. They become anchored. They become part of who you are. Because discipline is not about gritting your teeth. Discipline is about creating conditions where your best behavior becomes the easiest behavior. Now that we've laid the foundation and built the pillars, it's time to turn philosophy into practice. Because a great idea is only powerful when it becomes a daily action. Knowledge is the seed, but the habit is the harvest. And today, I want to help you design a simple, practical, and deeply personal tiny promise program, a plan you can begin immediately, not someday. Let's begin. Step 1, choose one promise and only one. Most people will be tempted to choose 5 promises, or 10, or 20. But that's the old pattern showing up, the pattern that says bigger is better, or I must transform overnight. We don't want that. We want transformation that lasts, not transformation that fizzles. So start with one promise, one tiny daily action that meets 3 criteria. 1, small enough that you can't talk yourself out of it. If the promise is too large, your feelings will negotiate. Tiny leaves no room for negotiation. 2, clear enough that you know instantly whether you did it or not. No vague promises like be healthier or work harder. Make it measurable. 10 push-ups. 1 glass of water. Read 2 pages. Stretch for 2 minutes. 3, valuable enough that it nudges your life in the right direction. A tiny promise should be small in size but meaningful in direction. Pick one. Just one. And let that one become your anchor. Step 2, write it down, make it official. I've said for years, goals must be in writing. The same is true of promises. When you write something down, it becomes a contract. It becomes real. It moves from imagination to intention. It shifts from idea to instruction. Write it on paper. Write it on a card. Write it on your phone. But write it clearly. For the next 30 days, I promise to, every single day, and sign your name underneath it. Sign it like a contract with your future. Step 3, attach it to a daily trigger. Human beings thrive on patterns. If your promise floats somewhere in the middle of the day, waiting for the right moment, your feelings will swallow it whole. But if your promise is tied to a daily trigger, something that already happens, your success rate goes through the roof. A trigger can be right after waking, right after brushing your teeth, right after breakfast, right before your shower, right before bed. The promise becomes part of something that already exists. And when habits are linked, habits stick. Choose a trigger that is consistent, neutral, and simple, and place your promise right beside it. Step 4, track it. The power of visible progress. Now, this part is crucial. You must track your progress, not for judgment, not for pressure, for proof. Proof that you're showing up, proof that you're consistent, proof that you're building evidence of who you are becoming. Use a calendar, use a notebook, use a simple checklist. Circle the day, put a check mark, draw a line. It doesn't matter how you track it. What matters is that you can see the streak growing, because when you see 10 days in a row, you'll want 11. When you see 20 days, you won't want to break the chain. Tracking is how discipline becomes momentum and momentum becomes identity. Step 5, expand only after 30 days, never before. Now, this is the part many people misunderstand. They think after 5 days, or 7 days, or 2 weeks, they're ready to add more. But remember, the first 30 days are not about building a habit. They are about building self-trust. The promise is tiny on purpose. The consistency is the lesson. Do not add to it. Do not increase the difficulty. Do not stack habits yet. Give yourself the gift of 30 days of simple, clear, undeniable consistency. And then after 30 days, you may add another tiny promise, or expand the first one by an inch. Not a mile, just an inch. Slow growth is strong growth. Rushing growth is fragile growth. And remember, the goal is not to do more. The goal is to become someone who can be trusted with more. Putting it all together. When you design your tiny promise program with these 5 steps, you create a system that does 3 powerful things. 1, it removes overwhelm. You're no longer wrestling with massive change. You're embracing small, doable change. 2, it removes negotiation. A tiny, clear promise leaves no room for excuses. 3, it builds identity. Day by day, week by week, you become someone dependable, someone reliable, someone you can trust. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the beginning of transformation. Not the flashy kind, but the permanent kind. Not the kind that burns bright and dies fast, but the kind that builds slow and lasts long. Because when a promise becomes part of your daily life, your life begins to shift in ways you never imagined. Now let's zoom out for a moment. Because while the tiny promise may look small up close, just a few minutes, just a few repetitions, just a few pages, when you step back, when you observe the long arc of your life, something extraordinary becomes clear. Consistency compounds. And the compounding of self-trust is one of the most powerful forces you will ever experience. We've talked about 30 days. We've talked about 90 days. We've talked about 180 days. But I want you to see what happens beyond that, not just in the next few months, but in the next few years. Because success is not built in days, it is built across decades. Let's explore the big picture. 8.1, 2 people, same start, completely different futures. Imagine 2 people, same job, same background, same intelligence, same opportunities. They start the year side by side, both eager, both motivated, both determined to make a change. But one person keeps tiny promises. The other follows their feelings. At first, the difference is invisible. Same routine, same mood, same results. But after 30 days, something begins to shift. After 90 days, the shift becomes obvious. After 180 days, the shift becomes undeniable. After a year, their lives no longer resemble each other. And after 5 years, they may as well be living on different planets. Why? Because one person invested daily in the bank of self-trust. The other person withdrew daily from that same account. One person built a foundation. The other person built excuses. One person proved themselves reliable. The other learned to negotiate with their own potential. And here's the truth. Life responds differently to each of them. 8.2, the marketplace rewards trustworthiness. Now, let me tell you something the world won't tell you openly. The marketplace doesn't reward talent first. It rewards reliability. It rewards the person who does what they say. It rewards the person who shows up consistently. It rewards the person who can be trusted internally and externally. When you trust yourself, you take more action. You deliver on your commitments. You're courageous in opportunity. You're consistent in performance. And people notice. They really notice. Clients trust you. Leaders trust you. Teammates trust you. Opportunities gravitate toward you because trustworthiness is rare. And what is rare becomes valuable. Now, imagine stacking that reliability day after day, year after year. That is how people rise. That is how careers change. That is how fortunes are built, not by chance, but by character. 8.3, freedom through self-control. There is a final truth here, one that goes deeper than success, deeper than achievement, deeper than career. It is the truth that ties this entire journey together. Real freedom comes from self-control. Most people think freedom means doing whatever you feel like doing whenever you feel like doing it. But that's not freedom, that's bondage. That's being controlled by impulses, by moods, by cravings, by momentary emotions. But when you develop self-trust, when you earn it, when you grow it, when you protect it, you gain the freedom to shape your future, the freedom to choose your direction, the freedom to follow your values instead of your impulses, the freedom to build a life on purpose instead of drifting. And let me tell you, that kind of freedom is worth every tiny promise, every small discipline, every act of consistency, because it gives you peace in your mind, strength in your character, confidence in your actions, and clarity in your path. The tiny promise may start small, but the impact grows beyond anything you can imagine. It compounds, it multiplies, it expands your life in every direction. You begin with a whisper of change. You end with a roar of transformation. That's the power of the big picture. That's the compounding effect of self-trust. And that is why the tiniest promise, kept daily, can rewrite your destiny. Ladies and gentlemen, let me leave you today with a thought, a challenge, and an invitation. You've heard the principles, you've heard the strategy, you've heard the truth about self-trust, how it's earned, how it's built, how it transforms the future. But now the question becomes, what will you do with it? Because information alone does not change your life. Inspiration alone does not change your life. Only application changes your life. And the application we've discussed today is simple, so simple you might be tempted to overlook it. A tiny promise, a daily commitment, a small action carried out with big intention. Let me encourage you, do not leave this moment without making a decision. When you're inspired, act. When you're moved, commit. Don't let the energy fade. Don't tell yourself you'll start next week or next month or when life calms down. Because life rarely calms down. The perfect moment never shows up. And waiting only strengthens the habit of delay. So ask yourself today, right now, what is the one tiny promise I will begin? Not 10 things, not 5 things, just one. One tiny promise that you will honor for the next 30 days. Something small enough to guarantee. Something clear enough to measure. Something meaningful enough to move your life in the right direction. Write it down. Sign your name. Claim it. Because that little commitment is more than a task. It's a declaration. It's you saying to yourself, I'm ready to rebuild. I'm ready to trust myself again. I'm ready to become someone I can depend on. And let me tell you something I've learned after decades of watching people transform their lives. When a person begins keeping promises to themselves, even tiny ones, their entire world begins to shift. They walk taller. They think clearer. They dream bigger. They commit deeper. They become the architect of their life instead of the passenger. And that can be you. Not someday, today. So let today be the beginning. Let today be the day you stop negotiating with your potential. Let today be the day you begin building your life on a foundation of self-trust. Let today be the day you say, I will, and then you make it true. Because when your word means something to yourself, your possibilities expand. Your opportunities grow. Your future opens. and you become someone capable of extraordinary things. So I invite you, start the journey. Begin with one tiny promise. Keep it today. Keep it tomorrow. Keep it for 30 days. Then 180. Then a lifetime. And soon you'll look back and realize you didn't just change your habits. You changed your identity. And once identity changes, everything changes. Thank you. Now go build the life you were meant to live.